Elon Musk, visionary entrepreneur, billionaire, and Twitter's most unpredictable disruptor. But beyond rockets and electric cars, Musk has found himself at the epicenter of a cultural clash that has ignited fierce debates worldwide. Since taking over Twitter, his vocal opposition to what he calls the woke mind virus has fueled controversy, impacting everything from LGBTQ+ advocacy to free speech policies on the platform. Here's the reality. In 2023 alone, Twitter saw a 20% increase in user reports of hate speech, even as Musk positioned himself as a champion of absolute free expression. Meanwhile, his decisions, like disbanding content moderation teams, have drawn backlash from civil rights organizations and praise from free speech advocates. What's at stake? Not just the future of one platform, but the larger battle over how we navigate the crossroads of free expression and inclusivity in a deeply divided world. To truly grasp Elon Musk's crusade against what he calls the woke mind virus, we must first delve into the origins of his unique worldview. A mix of relentless ambition, technological optimism, and a penchant for controversy. Musk's story is one of rare genius, bold risk-taking, and an unapologetic approach to life and business that has catapulted him into the global spotlight as one of the most polarizing figures of our time. Elon Musk was born in 1971 in Pretoria, South Africa. As a child, he stood out for his insatiable curiosity and love of science fiction, often immersing himself in books that explored futuristic worlds. His early years, however, were far from idyllic. Bullied at school and grappling with a challenging home life, Musk found solace in programming, teaching himself to code by the age of 12 and selling his first video game, Blaster. These formative experiences not only shaped his resilience, but also ignited a drive to reshape the world through technology. After moving to the United States, Musk's entrepreneurial spirit blossomed. In the late 1990s, he co-founded Zip2, an online business directory, which he sold for nearly $300 million. His next venture, X.com, evolved into PayPal, revolutionizing online payments and laying the foundation for his meteoric rise. Musk didn't stop there. His vision expanded to realms that seemed impossible to most: electric vehicles, sustainable energy, and even interplanetary colonization. Tesla redefined the auto industry, while SpaceX brought humanity closer to commercial space travel. Musk became a symbol of innovation, an individual capable of turning science fiction into reality. Yet, for all his technological triumphs, Musk's personality has always been equally compelling and contentious. His Twitter account, launched in 2010, became a window into his unfiltered thoughts. Unlike most CEOs, Musk didn't shy away from controversy. He embraced his role as a provocateur, using memes, cryptic messages, and sharp critiques to communicate with his followers. Over the years, his tweets touched on everything from the stock market to government overreach, often igniting debates and even lawsuits. This provocative side took a sharper turn as Musk began to voice his frustrations with what he saw as the creeping influence of progressive ideologies. Whether mocking the excesses of political correctness or questioning the priorities of social justice movements, Musk's online persona became inseparable from his corporate image, a blend of visionary thinker and cultural agitator. In late 2022, Musk acquired Twitter for $44 billion, framing it as a move to save free speech. He described the platform as the digital town square and pledged to uphold open dialogue, even as critics warned that his laissez-faire approach could amplify harmful content. His takeover was marked by sweeping changes, from mass layoffs to the reinstatement of controversial accounts previously banned for spreading hate speech and misinformation. At the heart of his philosophy lies a fierce opposition to what Musk calls the woke mind virus. This term encapsulates his criticism of progressive movements that, in his view, prioritize ideological conformity over reason and stifle dissenting voices. Musk's disdain for this perceived overreach is particularly pronounced when it comes to debates surrounding LGBTQ+ rights, diversity initiatives, and social justice advocacy. Musk's framing of these issues isn't just about semantics. It reflects a broader cultural war. He argues that the push for inclusivity and equity often crosses the line into censorship and moral authoritarianism. For example, Musk has clashed with employees, media outlets, and advocacy groups over his decision to disband Twitter's content moderation teams, claiming they enforced a woke agenda. While some celebrated these moves as a return to free expression, others viewed them as a dangerous rollback of protections against hate speech and harassment. Musk's actions have ripple effects far beyond the confines of Twitter. With 160+ million followers and his influence extending to Tesla, SpaceX, and other ventures, his voice shapes not just tech culture but global discourse. His critics accuse him of using his platform to punch down at marginalized groups, while supporters hail him as a defender of free thought in an age of conformity. In this volatile mix of ambition, ideology, and controversy, Musk has become more than just a businessman. He is a cultural symbol, a lightning rod for debates about the limits of progressivism, the meaning of free speech, and the role of powerful individuals in shaping societal values. The stage is set for a confrontation that will define not just Musk's legacy, but the larger battle over the future of our shared digital and social spaces. The phrase woke mind virus has become central to Elon Musk's cultural commentary, sparking both fervent support and fierce criticism. But what does Musk mean by this term, and why has it become a rallying cry in his ideological battle? To understand its significance, we must explore the broader context of his critique and the cultural forces at play. For Musk, the woke mind virus represents more than just a critique of modern social trends. It's a term that encapsulates his fear of ideological conformity, stifling progress. In his view, wokeness has evolved beyond advocating for social justice and equity to become a rigid framework that suppresses dissent and prioritizes performative virtue signaling over tangible results. Musk has warned that this mindset poses an existential threat to innovation and, by extension, humanity's future. One of his most provocative statements on the subject, "If woke culture takes over, humanity will never reach Mars," highlights his belief that societal overreach could derail long-term technological and scientific advancements. Musk argues that societal focus on issues like diversity quotas, microaggressions, and political correctness often comes at the expense of meritocracy and free inquiry, principles he considers essential to human progress. To Musk, these trends are distractions that risk stalling humanity's potential to tackle existential challenges, such as climate change, sustainable energy, and space exploration. Not everyone shares Musk's interpretation. Critics argue that his framing of the woke mind virus oversimplifies and trivializes complex issues of inequality, discrimination, and historical injustice. Many view his rhetoric as dismissive of legitimate struggles faced by marginalized communities, including LGBTQ+ individuals, women, and racial minorities. For example, movements advocating for LGBTQ+ rights seek not just representation, but systemic change in areas like workplace discrimination, healthcare access, and social acceptance. To activists, Musk's rhetoric can feel like an attempt to undermine these efforts, reducing them to cultural overreach rather than necessary progress. They point out that inclusivity is not inherently at odds with innovation, citing studies that show diverse teams are often more creative and effective problem solvers. Musk's leadership at Twitter has amplified this cultural clash. Since his acquisition in late 2022, the platform has become a battleground for free speech versus safety concerns. Musk's changes have included reinstating banned accounts. Musk restored accounts previously banned for hate speech and misinformation, arguing that everyone deserves a second chance and that suspension should be rare and reserved for extreme cases. This decision has been celebrated by some as a restoration of free expression, but criticized by others as enabling harmful voices. Content moderation overhaul. Musk reduced Twitter's content moderation efforts, disbanding teams responsible for trust and safety, and implementing an anything-goes approach within legal limits. Critics argue this has emboldened hate speech and harassment, particularly against LGBTQ+ individuals and other marginalized groups. Reports have documented a significant increase in slurs and targeted harassment since Musk's takeover. Push for citizen journalism. Musk has promoted the idea that Twitter should empower individuals to challenge mainstream narratives. While some see this as a democratization of information, Others worry it provides a platform for conspiracy theories and misinformation. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups have expressed particular concern about the impact of these changes. Without robust content moderation, they argue, the platform has become less safe for queer individuals who often face targeted harassment online. Musk's critics claim his policies disproportionately affect marginalized groups, turning his vision of free speech into a shield for harmful behaviors. Musk's counterargument is rooted in his belief that true free speech requires tolerating uncomfortable and even offensive ideas. Freedom of speech, he has said, doesn't mean freedom from consequences. In his view, society has become too quick to silence dissenting voices in the name of avoiding harm, a trend he considers antithetical to open dialogue and intellectual growth. This philosophy resonates with many of his supporters, who see Musk as a defender of individual liberties against what they perceive as an oppressive cultural orthodoxy. They argue that the push for inclusivity often results in overreach, creating an environment where people are afraid to voice unpopular opinions for fear of backlash or cancellation. At the core of Musk's campaign lies an age-old debate. Where do we draw the line between free expression and societal harm? Advocates of Musk's approach argue that open platforms are essential for challenging dominant narratives and fostering innovation. Critics, however, contend that unchecked speech can lead to real-world consequences, including the perpetuation of harm against vulnerable communities. This tension reflects broader societal shifts in the digital age. Social media platforms like Twitter are no longer just tools for communication. They are arenas where culture, politics, and identity collide. As the stakes grow higher, Musk's experiment with Twitter becomes a microcosm of the global struggle to balance individual freedoms with collective responsibility. The woke mind virus debate is more than just Musk's personal crusade. It's a reflection of larger cultural divisions. On one side are those who prioritize free expression and fear the rise of ideological conformity. On the other are those who advocate for inclusivity and believe that societal progress requires addressing historical injustices and systemic inequalities. Musk's actions at Twitter have placed him squarely at the center of this ideological battle. Whether his approach will lead to a freer, more innovative society or deepen divisions remains to be seen. What's clear is that the outcomes of his experiment will have profound implications, not just for Twitter, but for the way society navigates the intersection of free speech, inclusivity, and progress in the 21st century. Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter has had significant repercussions for the LGBTQ+ community, transforming the platform from a space of advocacy and solidarity into a battleground for debates over free speech and safety. Under Musk's leadership, the loosening of content moderation policies has coincided with a rise in hate speech and harassment, raising questions about the consequences of prioritizing abstract ideals of free expression over the lived realities of marginalized communities. For years, Twitter has served as an essential platform for LGBTQ+ individuals and organizations. It has been a space where queer voices amplify their stories, advocate for equality, and challenge societal norms. Movements like #LoveWins and #TransRightsAreHumanRights gain momentum through platforms like Twitter, helping to shift public opinion and secure tangible policy changes worldwide. The platform's tools, hashtags, real-time communication, and the ability to connect with global communities have made it invaluable for advocacy and resistance. However, the safety of LGBTQ+ users on Twitter has always been a concern. Even before Musk's tenure, the platform struggled to balance free expression with the need to protect users from harassment. Content moderation policies and specialized teams, such as those focused on trust and safety, were critical in creating a space where marginalized voices could thrive without fear of constant abuse. Musk's acquisition of Twitter in late 2022 marked a turning point. His decision to disband content moderation teams and implement a more hands-off approach to harmful content was framed as a move to protect free speech. However, the practical effects of these changes have been stark, particularly for the LGBTQ+ community. Numerous studies and reports have documented a measurable increase in anti-LGBTQ+ hate speech on the platform. For example, Research conducted shortly after Musk's takeover showed a 60% increase in tweets containing anti-LGBTQ+ slurs, with some slurs being used tens of thousands of times daily. Harassment campaigns targeting high-profile LGBTQ+ individuals and organizations also surged, often coordinated through newly reinstated accounts previously banned for promoting hate speech. These changes have made Twitter a more hostile environment for many LGBTQ+ users. Activists and advocacy groups have noted that the platform, once a safe space for connection and empowerment, has become a place where harassment is not only tolerated but emboldened by the lack of enforcement. Critics of Musk's approach argue that his vision of free speech fails to account for the systemic power imbalances that make hate speech more than just offensive words. For marginalized groups like the LGBTQ+ community, a slur or a threat carries more weight than a simple disagreement. It can silence voices, discourage participation, and perpetuate a culture of exclusion. Hate speech is not just about individual instances of harm. It reflects and reinforces societal power dynamics. For LGBTQ+ individuals, particularly those at the intersections of race, gender, and socioeconomic status, online harassment often mirrors the discrimination they face offline. Musk's critics argue that by dismantling safeguards designed to address these imbalances, he has effectively turned Twitter into a megaphone for those seeking to harm vulnerable communities. The rise in hate speech on Twitter has had real-world consequences. LGBTQ+ activists report feeling less safe using the platform, with many choosing to reduce their engagement or leave entirely. This exodus of voices diminishes the diversity of perspectives on Twitter, undermining its role as a digital town square. For some, the backlash against Musk's policies is personal. LGBTQ+ individuals and allies who had come to rely on Twitter as a tool for advocacy and community building now feel abandoned. Organizations like GLAAD and the Human Rights Campaign have criticized Musk for failing to prioritize user safety, arguing that his policies disproportionately harm marginalized groups. Musk, however, sees these criticisms as evidence of the very woke mind virus he seeks to combat. He argues that free speech must be upheld, even if it means tolerating uncomfortable or offensive ideas. In his view, efforts to regulate speech often lead to ideological conformity and censorship, stifling the open exchange of ideas necessary for progress. Musk's supporters echo this sentiment, framing the backlash against him as an attempt by progressive movements to maintain ideological control. They argue that the LGBTQ+ community, like all groups, must participate in the marketplace of ideas and should not be shielded from criticism or disagreement. To them, the rise in controversial speech is a natural consequence of free expression, not a sign of harm but a reflection of diverse perspectives. This clash between Musk and the LGBTQ+ community is part of a larger cultural debate over the boundaries of free speech and the responsibilities of platforms to protect vulnerable users. Musk's policies reflect a libertarian philosophy that prioritizes individual freedom over collective responsibility. His critics, on the other hand, argue that platforms like Twitter have a duty to address systemic inequalities and ensure that all voices can participate without fear of harm. The stakes of this debate extend beyond Twitter. As the platform continues to shape public discourse, the way it navigates these tensions will influence broader societal norms around speech, safety, and inclusivity. For the LGBTQ+ community, the fight for a safer, more equitable online space is not just about Twitter. It's about ensuring that progress toward equality is not undone in the name of free expression. The LGBTQ+ backlash against Musk's policies highlights the challenges of balancing free speech with the need for safety and equity in a digital age. As Twitter evolves under Musk's leadership, the platform's future will depend on whether it can address these concerns without compromising its core mission of facilitating open dialogue. For now, the LGBTQ+ community remains caught in the crossfire of Musk's ideological battle. A reminder that the consequences of these decisions are not just abstract, but deeply personal for those who rely on platforms like Twitter to amplify their voices and fight for their rights. The question remains, can Twitter truly be a digital town square if it fails to protect the most vulnerable members of its community? Elon Musk's ongoing battle against what he calls the woke mind virus has thrown open the doors to a broader, more contentious debate. Where should society draw the line between free speech and accountability, particularly when the rights and safety of marginalized communities are at stake? His leadership at Twitter is a microcosm of this struggle, highlighting the challenges of balancing ideals of unfettered expression with the practical need to ensure platforms remain safe and inclusive. Since Musk's acquisition of Twitter, the platform has undergone radical changes, with implications that extend far beyond its user base. Musk has framed these shifts as a necessary recalibration, turning Twitter into a truly open digital town square. By reducing content moderation and restoring previously banned accounts, Musk has sought to foster an environment where all perspectives can coexist, even those deemed offensive or controversial. However, these changes have come at a cost. LGBTQ+ activists and advocacy groups argue that this hands-off approach to moderation has created an online space rife with harassment and hate speech. The rise in anti-LGBTQ+ content on Twitter is not just a matter of perception. Numerous studies have documented significant increases in slurs, targeted harassment, and organized disinformation campaigns aimed at queer individuals and communities. While Musk's defenders claim that free speech must be messy to be meaningful, critics counter that the lack of safeguards disproportionately harms marginalized groups, effectively silencing their voices and diminishing the diversity of perspectives that a town square should champion. The debate over Musk's policies highlights a deeper cultural divide. On one side are those who see free speech as an unassailable right, essential to democracy and innovation. On the other are those who argue that free speech must be tempered by responsibility, particularly when systemic inequalities mean some voices are drowned out by louder, more harmful ones. For the LGBTQ+ community, this divide is particularly poignant. Social media platforms like Twitter have long been lifelines for queer individuals, offering spaces for connection, advocacy, and resistance in the face of societal discrimination. Many activists see Musk's policies as a betrayal of this role, prioritizing ideological battles over the real-world needs of vulnerable users. Musk's critics argue that his vision of free speech ignores the power dynamics at play in public discourse. A hate-filled tweet might be little more than noise to a billionaire, but for a trans teenager facing discrimination in their daily life, it can be a source of profound harm. Yet, Musk and his supporters see the backlash as evidence of the very woke mind virus they oppose. To them, the criticism reflects a culture increasingly intolerant of dissent, where speech is policed not to prevent harm, but to enforce ideological conformity. The tension between free speech and accountability is not new, but Musk's actions have brought it to the forefront of public debate. Can platforms truly claim to champion free expression if they fail to address the systemic inequalities that make some voices louder than others? Conversely, can efforts to moderate content ever be fully impartial, or do they inevitably risk silencing dissenting viewpoints? For LGBTQ+ rights, these questions have immediate and tangible implications. Activists argue that hate speech is not just a moral failing, but a barrier to equality. Online harassment can discourage queer individuals from participating in public discourse, limiting their ability to advocate for themselves and their communities. Musk's approach has amplified these challenges. By dismantling content moderation frameworks and disbanding teams focused on trust and safety, critics argue that he has effectively prioritized an abstract ideal of free speech over the practical realities of ensuring all users feel safe and respected. The consequences of Musk's policies are not confined to Twitter. Social media platforms play a central role in shaping public discourse and influencing societal norms. When hate speech proliferates unchecked, it risks normalizing discriminatory attitudes, undermining the progress made by LGBTQ+ movements over decades of advocacy. For queer individuals living in hostile environments, the erosion of safeguards on platforms like Twitter can have life-altering consequences. The internet often serves as a rare refuge, a place where they can find support and validation. When these spaces are compromised, the effects ripple outward, diminishing the capacity for collective action and resilience. Looking ahead, the battle over free speech and LGBTQ+ rights is unlikely to abate. Musk's critics are mobilizing, calling for greater regulation of social media platforms to ensure they uphold their responsibilities to marginalized users. At the same time, his supporters continue to champion his vision of an unfiltered public square, arguing that progress requires the freedom to challenge prevailing norms, even at the risk of offending some. For the LGBTQ+ community, the path forward will require navigating these tensions while continuing to advocate for platforms that value both free expression and inclusivity. Advocacy groups are increasingly calling for platforms to adopt more nuanced approaches to content moderation, ones that balance the need for open dialogue with the responsibility to protect vulnerable users. The stakes are high, not just for Twitter, but for society as a whole. Musk's experiment with free speech has highlighted the complexities of navigating digital spaces in an era of heightened polarization. Whether his approach will lead to a more open and innovative society or deepen existing divides remains an open question. Elon Musk's battle against the woke mind virus has thrust Twitter into the heart of a global conversation about the future of free speech and inclusivity. For the LGBTQ+ community, the stakes are personal and profound. As the platform continues to evolve, its ability or failure to balance these competing values will shape not only its user base but also the broader cultural landscape. In the end, the question is not just about Musk or Twitter. It's about the kind of society we want to build. One where all voices can thrive, or one where the loudest voices drown out the rest. As the world watches this experiment unfold, one thing is certain. The answers we find will resonate far beyond the confines of 280 characters.